How's everyone doing today? Good. I'm Holly Lever. Most of you probably already know. I'm the marketing coordinator here at the Cultural Arts Center. And as you can tell, Ellen is out with us today. She's currently traveling. She's on vacation. She is on a riverboat cruise over in Budapest. And Todd mentioned this morning, I don't know if you saw the news, but there was a wreck, a riverboat cruise had a wreck over there. So we were really concerned about her, but I actually just talked to her this morning, so she's okay. So that was good to hear, but she wanted to say that she's with us in spirit, and she's sad that she wasn't able to be here today, but she's with us in spirit. So also just think about her as she's on vacation and traveling. We're just thinking about her, and I'm glad that she's safe. So today I'm really excited to introduce to you guys Tim Murphy. He is a ceramic artist and painter, and his work is currently on display in the Loft gallery. The title of the show is called It Goes Beyond the Face. And before I turn it over to Tim today, I'm going to read over his artist statement just to give you kind of a brief overview of his work. And then he'll talk more in depth about his process and background and his pieces in general. So bear with me here, and I'm going to read through his artist statement, which you may have seen already out there. Evoking human emotion through expressive sculpted heads and creating a stage and narrative for such characters. This is what he is seeking to portray throughout his works. The paintings Tim creates are a theater in which these embodied ceramic heads exist to act out their eternal plays, whether they are drawn from subjects like the Bible or mythology or even everyday events. In recent years, Tim began to combine his paintings with sculpted ceramic heads. He has always been fascinated by the human face. When he was 14 years old, he started carving faces on sticks, as well as carving boards with faces. As Tim got older, he tried carving primitive-style masks and sculpting faces with clay. As his work progressed into painting and beyond, he began combining the faces with the painted surface. Tim's paintings are scrap plywood panels, typically an inch thick and of similar dimensions. He usually builds the frame before doing any actual painting, because he wants to give the viewer a feeling that they are looking in on the narrative and are part of the conversation, that these frames are like the curtains of a stage or that they act as a window pane. Building these first unifies the frame within the painting. Then he proceeds to create these envisioned characters in his ceramic heads, as well as painting their stage, whether that be a living room or the depths of hell. Tim would like to continue making paintings like his most recent works. He is more interested in the everyday human connections than monumental scenes. Artists like George Bellows, as well as others from the Aspen School, and other artists such as Elijah Pierce, Nolan Avery, and Joseph Cornell are all people who inspire him in his art making and who he aspires to be like. Tim has been taking classes here at CAC for about 5 or 6 years. He said he first started taking life drawing classes with Susan, and then he kind of transferred over to ceramic classes, which you still do currently. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim and let him share more about his work.
All right. Well, just a little brief about me. I'm from Painesville, Ohio, up near Lake Erie, northeastern corner of the state. Painesville. And so I grew up there, and when I graduated from high school, I moved down to Mount Vernon, Ohio, and that's where I went to college. I have a bachelor's degree in art, and that's where I met my wife, Lori. And 1 week after we graduated, we got married, and we have 4 kids and 3 grandchildren. So that's a little bit about me and my history. Do I need this? Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? So a little bit about my work, my process. What I do is, I have been a painter mostly for my whole life, but just recently taking the ceramics classes, actually under Eric. He was my first teacher down there. And one of the things that we went through in the hand building process was the making of faces and heads. And I kind of really latched on to that.
That's one way to say it.
That's pretty much all I do down there. And it's just, he showed me the simple way of building these heads, which is, I don't know if you're familiar, but a pinch pot is a real simple pot. You just take a ball of clay and you just stick your thumbs in the middle of it and you make a little bowl. Well, you put two of those together with this, you score them, put two of those together, and then you can form a face into that. So I just started making these faces, these heads, and I started to get a pretty good sized collection of them around the house, and I kind of thought, well, what am I going to do with these? So then my wife came up with an idea. I had these crosses that I had built. There were 5 of them down in my basement studio, and I hadn't really thought of anything to do with them. And she thought, well, what would happen if you attach these heads to these crosses? So I put them on the crosses, laid them out, and it actually looked pretty good. And so I decided that just the heads on the crosses wasn't quite good enough, so I painted their bodies on the crosses also. So you had the ceramic head, you had the cross, and then you had the painted body. And then the 5 pieces put together made a really nice one art piece. So I took that and entered it into the State Fair show, and it won a juror's award, and somebody bought it. So I was quite surprised about that. So from then on, I just started putting these heads on panels. The way I attach them, this is one of the pieces. This is called academic disagreement. And so what I do is I figure out where on, this is a board. Can't do it on canvas. But what I do is I run a nail into the board where I'm going to place the head, and then I use epoxy, and each head has a hole in the back of it. So it slides onto the nail, and then I epoxy the head to the surface. So that's pretty much my process, and then after they're in place, then I'm free to paint their bodies and whatever narrative I want for the piece. So in this particular case, it was an academic disagreement. So that's my process. That's what I do. I've also turned to some other things. This was one of my earlier pieces. This is called Old Men Dream Dreams. And if you can see on the bed, there's an elderly man sleeping, and hovering above him is his dream girl. I have a brother who's a college art professor in New York, and he thought that maybe this is God in his heavenly bedroom dreaming about Eve, his first female creation. I kind of like that idea too. But yeah, I've started doing some of these also. It's like a little stage set. The bed and the old man are made of ceramic, and the woman is made of ceramic, and the rest is wood. And then I use a lot of found materials too. So these are rusty hinges that I put on there. It doesn't move or anything. It's just there more for decorative purposes. And then I painted it. You know, there's a window and some lights and stuff. So there's that kind of thing going on.
So, why don't you share a little bit about your collaborative piece?
Out in the gallery, there's five paintings that were a combination that I did with my brother, who I mentioned. What I did was I sent him a bunch of heads and faces. And the faces that I'm talking about are these small faces that I do, like that one right there, one there, up on the front here. I did these little faces and I used them for different things, but the heads are the big ones that I use in the paintings. So he requested that I send him faces and heads, and he wanted to see what he could do with them. So out in the gallery, maybe on your way out if you want, you can kind of go down and around the corner. There's 5 very different takes. His take is a little different than mine. I like to combine the heads with like a full body painting. They'll have bodies. His take is a little different, where he really just uses the head. Like he's got one out there. You have a question?
I like the city scene. It gives me some feelings and emotions, and I really like that.
Thank you.
And where did you get the idea for that one?
I've always wanted to do a city scene. You know, being here in Columbus.
It just gives a certain flavor and emotions when you got the faces in front, and then you got the old houses and buildings in the back, and
Right.
the wires and the street lights.
Yeah.
You know, and it just gives a rustic feeling to it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I kind of have those same feelings. We can talk about this for a second. I painted the buildings first. That was the first thing I did. And then I altered them in different ways. Then I added these heads to the painting. This painting has more heads on it than any other one I've done. I really struggled with this painting. I went over it so many times before I finally felt really good about how it looked.
I think you did a really good job on the buildings, and it gives a feeling to it, you know? It's just like the sky, it looks like one of them cloudy days, and it looks like the people, they're kind of, you know, not happy, not joyful, but it's like another day in the city, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of got a little bit of a rainy feel. The light that's shining out of this building here is casting shadows, so it's kind of an overcast day, maybe even heading into evening. I tried to intermingle some other people. The ones that are closest are the ones with the ceramic heads. I felt really good about it when I finally finished it. I felt like all these people have turned their attention this way, like something over here has
It's
happened.
like a hot building is on fire, you
Yeah,
know?
something's happened over here.
Or you got somebody that's gonna jump or something.
Yeah, that's a possibility too. Or maybe there's buildings over here and they're just window shopping. You know, maybe they're looking into other buildings. But my brother, who I've mentioned a couple times, he saw this and he said it had kind of a 70s taxi driver feel to it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Was the tan model on Deansville?
Well, what's funny is there's drugs, was a drugstore in Painesville. And we used to go there because they had these things called phosphates. And it was like the only place you could get one.
Living in line.
I'm sure they have that. It was a long time ago, so I don't really remember what they had, but yeah, so I put Thayer's drugs because I couldn't fit pharmacy on there, but that was just kind of a little hint towards my childhood. You have questions?
Yeah, when you make these heads, do you just say, feel like I'm gonna make some heads, or does every head have an intention already in mind?
Both. I have a cabinet at home that I keep all the heads that I've made, and right now there's about 25 of them in there. There's one group of them that I'm making intentionally because I wanted to do a Last Supper piece. So I've got a bunch of heads set aside for like the disciples. But that I haven't even started that one yet. So the heads are sitting in there. But there's a lot of heads that I do intentionally. There's a lot that I just, when I need a head, I go through, and if I need one that's, you know, some man doing something, you know, then I'll look for the right. Like this one, I knew I wanted to do an older couple sitting in their chairs, so I looked in my cabinet, and these are the two I found. So it just depends. Oh, I'm sorry. This one is called
Something ain't right between Tiffany and Zach.
That's it. The reason for that title is I wanted to call it Edith and Archie, because that's what it looked like to me. It was Archie Bunker. I grew up watching All in the Family, but my wife had a different take on it. She thought, what if we named it Tiffany and Zach? Because those are young kid names right now. And someday they're not going to be young kids, they're going to be elderly, and they might be sitting in their chair having an argument, and the only thing I didn't put in there was tattoos on their arm. Yeah. So that's that one.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned your brother, your art is beautiful. Do you come from an artistic family, or your parents painting?
No. My mother was a bus driver, and my dad worked in factories all his life. But my brother, who's older than me, he's 5 years older than me, he was always very artistic, and you know, as growing up, I was the youngest of 6, and he was closest to me in age. So I probably copied a lot of the things that he was doing. And art was just something that kind of came naturally for me a little bit. So, you know, but you know, we're really the only two in the family that are into art very much. One of my sons just graduated from Ohio State and has his Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. And he and his brother just were deployed to the Middle East. So they'll be gone for about a year. But he's excited to get back. He's excited to get back because he wants to apply for graduate school for art, painting and drawing.
What inspires you to do these paintings?
I get ideas from all kinds of stuff. I mean, this one's an opera singer. This one, which is a little unusual, is a man facing temptation.
Can you tell us the story about this opera singer, Tim?
Sure. This one's called The Opera Singer. This piece originally was made in about 1957. My oldest brother, who's 70 now, built this frame, put the panel in there, and he did this as part of his 7th grade shop class. And what it was is they were supposed to take a wooden panel, put a frame around it, and then cut pieces of wood to form something. So that's exactly what he did, and what he formed was a cat. Do you see the cat? These are the ears. And this right here is where the whiskers would have been. There was a nose in here, and there were 2 eyes up there. And it was all just plywood, just raw plywood. And this thing hung in our house for 20 years probably, until someone stuck it in a drawer somewhere. And last summer, my dad, who is 96 now, he lives with my sister, and he decided that it was time to sell the house. So all my siblings and I got together up in Paynesville and cleaned out the house. The house sold. And so we were going through stuff, and my brother found this piece that he had made, and he was showing everybody. Everybody's getting a good laugh out of it. Well, then he took it to throw it in the dumpster. I said, well, wait a minute. So I took it from him. I said, I'm going to do something with that. So I brought it home. There was a tail coming up here, so I broke that off. And this looked like a woman's body to me, wearing a dress. So I painted it as a gown. I worked on the cleavage a little bit. And then I added one of my heads. This was a head that I had in the cupboard. And then I painted the background and turned it into what it is, the opera singer. I called it Queen of the Night because that's like one of my favorite pieces of opera. If you ever want to hear it, it's on Mozart's The Magic Flute. It's the most incredible vocal gymnastics that anyone can go through singing. I can't think of anything more incredible. Anyway, that was the idea behind this. I put these little faces on here, kind of giving it the idea of theater, you know. So, and the funniest part of the whole story is what he was going to throw in the dumpster. This one just sold for $500. So I sent
How much
him
of that is she getting?
What's that?
How much of that is she getting?
Well, I sent him a message, or my wife sent him a message saying, hey, Dan. And he sent a message back saying, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. But he got a big kick out of it. Question?
I noticed that some of your heads have necks and some don't. Is this a period you've gone through?
Yeah.
Going from one to the other?
The early heads that I made, I kept the necks on there. I don't really do that as much anymore. I don't mind them, but it seems to work better without the neck. So I've kind of gotten away from that. Okay.
Do you have any smiling heads anywhere?
Smiling? Well, he's kind of smiling.
That's a stretch.
I don't know if I have any that are smiling. This is another piece that I did. This was on some of the posters. This one is called "What Were You Thinking?" And you know, you've got this little clown face here, and he's kind of got this faraway look. And if you look closely, he's got the painted smile, but his mouth is not smiling. And then this guy is right here in his ear, kind of chewing him out for something. They're in a circus tent, and you've got the flag up there. And it's anyone's guess why he was being chewed out. Maybe he did something in his performance that got him into trouble, but the guy who's yelling at him could be the ringmaster, or it could be some guy from the front office of the circus. It's hard to say. You have a question?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to say, Paynesville, isn't that an island off of the shores of Lake Erie?
No. Paynesville is right on Lake Erie.
Oh, okay.
When I was a kid, I could ride my bike to the beach in about 20 minutes.
Okay.
There are some islands further west in Lake Erie. Kelly's Island, Putin Bay, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to know for sure because I want to clear that up.
Yeah. No, it's further east it's the northeastern corner of Ohio. And most of the islands are on the western end of Lake Erie.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Can you talk a little bit about how much time each one of these takes and when you put the heads on there? Because it seems like you'd have to have the painting sort of going before you know what the story is or what the head, like the actual placement.
Well, early on, I would stick these heads right into place. They were glued on and everything before I did anything else. But then I realized it's kind of hard to paint around these.
Yeah, right.
So what I started to do is I place the nail, place the head, but don't glue it down.
What drives you to place the head in these different places? Are you envisioning kind of what it will be?
Well,
Thinking about it, or are you?
These three right here, these we call them the conversation pieces because they all look like they're having a conversation. I knew kind of what I wanted to do in these three, so I put these heads on and then came up with the painting. Other times, you know, not so much, you know.
Yeah.
It really depends.
So how long do they take from the painting part?
Well, these
Well,
three
and the
were-
heads, that would be interesting to know too.
What's that?
How long it takes to make a head,
The heads
and then
take,
how long it takes to make the painting.
I usually do one head every class that I take. So I've always got one or two heads in the process. Usually there's one back there waiting to be fired while I'm making the next one. A couple days ago I made one at home that I'm going to bring in to get fired. But the heads usually take a couple hours because when I make them, at the same time that I make them, I also, while they're still very fresh and green, I try to get the first layer of color. I use underglazes, and the underglazes, underglaze you can put on the whole thing and set it in the kiln, and it won't stick to the shelf. They're different than glazes that you would use for pottery, because those you can't put it on the bottom or it's stuck to the shelf. You know. So these underglazes, you can do a lot of stuff with them and not have to worry about that. But what I do is I glaze them first, and then I use a product called Gursley Borate, which is, what is that, Eric? Is that a chemical?
It's a naturally mined material.
Yeah. I use Gursley Borate as my sheen. There are commercial sheen
The clear glaze.
clear glaze, yeah, that you can use. I don't particularly like the way they look. They're a little too shiny for me. I know there's some that aren't quite as shiny, but I really like the way Gursley Borate goes on, because not only does it give it a certain type of sheen, but it also kind of adds a little color to it, almost like you've rubbed some color into it, but not really tried to apply it. So anyway, I just like the way it works, and it's kind of the process that I use on every head.
So the heads come out when you're finished, the color is already on the head.
Yeah, and I also, when they go through the first firing, they've got the first layer of color. When I bring them out, I have a dark underglaze that I paint over the whole thing and then wipe it off, and it gets down into all the little cracks and crevices and just gives it a lot more character. You know, if you look at like her face, you can see how it gets down into the little cracks and crevices of her wrinkles. So that's what I use the dark glaze for. And as soon as I put the dark glaze on and then wipe it off, then I put the Gerstli borate on for the final glaze. And I think it works really well.
Do you wipe the Gerstli borate away as well, or is it just, you know?
I try to put it on like a dry brush, real thin. If it goes on too heavy, I might wipe a little bit of that off. But I've learned that if you put it on real heavy, it gets real shiny.
Yeah.
So I try not to let that happen too much.
Something like the clown's mouth and her stockings and whatnot with the additional color, is that after the fact, or is that part of the, when you have?
Yeah, all the color is put on at once. Like you can see the dark that's caught in all the
Right.
nooks and crannies. That's the second glazing.
Okay, so that's all part of the.
Now this, you can see how shiny this is.
Right.
This was not Gerstli borate. This was the regular clear glaze from the. And I like these, but I kind of wish they weren't quite that shiny. So I've gotten away from that. Here's another piece that I've done. Some of these pieces are just a little side thing from the paintings. I like to do the paintings more. This is a piece that I did called "In the Land of the Blind, the One-Eyed Man is King." You probably all heard that phrase, right? So my wife had this idea she had this box, and she said, I think you can make something with this box. It had a lid, has this lid, and she said, what I envision, she had this vision in her head.
He needs to listen to me.
She said, what I envision is a painting that goes outside and inside the box on every surface, and then in the middle there's a head. I thought, well, okay. So I took that idea and I thought about the phrase, "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." And so I painted all the surfaces with these little blind men. They've just got their eyes closed, but that's signified, to signify that they're blind. And they're wearing black robes, and they're bald. They're all bald. And then on the inside, there's the one-eyed man, who is a large head, and he's got an eye patch on, and so he's got one eye. And then down on the floor in front of him are two of the blind guys that almost, like they're worshiping their king. And then around the king are these kind of cherub faces with wings, almost like he's sort of deity. And I was very excited because this piece sold in the show too. So, and Lori was excited because she doesn't have to come back home.
And before you started doing, do you call these assemblages? What do you call them?
I mean, it could be. Yeah.
Okay. So before you started doing these, what was your painting? I mean, a lot of these have philosophical thoughts or some religious overtones.
A lot of my painting was just like that. Just one of my favorite topics for some reason, and I don't know why, but for some reason I've done a lot of Adam and Eve. And I have several paintings of Adam and Eve at home. That was before the ceramic head idea. And I've always painted in kind of this style. It's I don't even know how to really qualify it. There's a lot of painters who I really admire. Milton Avery, Elijah Pierce, who's not a painter, he's really a carver. But This is just kind of the way I paint.
Even in your like drawing class, you're next to Atticus.
Yeah.
You're totally different.
My son Atticus is very strong with his technical skills in art. His life drawing, the stuff that he draws is just amazing. Well, that's not how I draw. I draw the way I paint, you know, and
Expressions.
yeah, it's just art. You know?
So his poems,
This reminds me of a rock.
Which one are you pointing at?
And just the way that,
Painting?
yeah, turn it upside down or sideways. It's very abstract.
I see what you're saying, yeah. We can talk about this one briefly. I really enjoy doing musical musicians, instruments. I want to do more of them. I want to do some like a brass ensemble or an orchestra. And so I did that one first, and that was very successful for me. It sold at the State Fair last summer, and it won the Jurors Award. And Dr. Roy Gottlieb bought that one. And apparently, there were some other people interested in it too. So I thought, well, I kind of like this theme, so I tried another one. Only this time, I wanted to add a different kind of element to it, so I decided to put a piano in there. And I like the idea of this lid standing up. And you know, you got this big square rectangle here, and then you've got this nice triangle here, and then I liked adding this line behind it, along with the slant of the cello. So,
if I may say so, is one of the best.
So when you go to make a head, do you just sort of start pushing and pulling on the clay?
I'll have two balls in my hand, and I'll stick my thumb in the middle of them, so that it's like a little cup, and then I've got another little cup, and I score the edge of both cups, and put a little slip on it, put them together, so that they're like this. And once they're together, then I can start forming the features of the face inside of it.
Do you kind of know what it's going to look like when you start that, or do they?
I start them all kind of the same way. They all start the same way. I start, you know, by forming the nose and the, you know, the brow. And then from there they change. You know, this one, I decided to have him like he's got a broken nose at some point in his life. So he's got a crooked nose. This one, he doesn't, you know. I went through this little phase for a while where I was having them all have kind of broken noses. I kind of like the curve to it. But yeah, they all start out the same, but you know, if it's one that's going to be like a female figure, I'll make the nose much smaller. You know, like this one with the elderly woman. And a lot of the faces that I'm making now are smaller than some of these earlier ones were bigger. And then here's a piece that I decided to use a full figure, ceramic full figure in it. And yet I wanted to put it on a painting. So, you know, getting away from, because I've done some full figure sculptures, but I wanted this one to actually be on painting. And so I made this guy in the ceramics class. He's got a Bible in his hand. This is called the snake handler. And so I put this big audience around him. He's up on a stage, and he's got several snakes in this stage with him. And then he's got a snake that's wrapped around it. And the crowd, the expressions on their faces are expressions of amazement. He's got somebody's snake. And it was just a fun piece.
Sort of like the chicken and the egg, isn't it? Which comes
Which
first,
comes
the
first?
painting or the head or vice versa?
Well, in this case, the figure came first, and then I tried to decide what originally he was going to just be a preacher. I was going to call it Preacher Man, but it just needed something else. So then I added in the snakes, and I like using snakes. I've got a snake in this piece. The snake is wrapped around. This piece is called Death and the Maiden and the Serpent. And you've got the maiden right here, and you've got death on the back of the tree, and then the serpent is wrapping its body all the way around both of them, and they're both kind of tied to the tree by the serpent. It's a little bit of a take off of Edvard Munch, did a very famous Death and the Maiden, where death is embracing the maiden, and I just took it a little different direction.
Can you touch on your color palette? Your native color palette?
Yeah. I use, when I'm painting, I use a lot of different kinds of paint. I use house paints, I use artist oil paints, I use a lot of glazes. I spent a lot of years doing decorative painting in people's homes. So I always had my hands in glaze. I was doing ragging and faux finishing and decorative painting, murals, trompe l'oeil, marbling, wood grating. I did all that kind of stuff for many, many years. And so I got a real feel for glaze and what I can do with it in art. And so I use a lot of glazes in my art. Sometimes it gives it kind of an antiquing feel. This piece here, I used a lot of glazes when I was doing like the circus tent background. My favorite color to add is like a raw umber. Added to a glaze makes great shadows. The shadows behind these guys when they're fighting or having their argument, this is all clear glaze with raw umber added to it. I think it adds a lot of character. I kind of have a hard time just looking at solid color sometimes. I feel like when you add glazes to it, it breaks up the solid color and just makes it a lot more interesting.
I have a question to you.
Yeah.
The painting just behind you, quoted. That one. And that is quite strange to me because it's quite unusual to include contrabass in a quartet.
Yes.
And usually quartet has cellos and 2 violins and 1 viola. But the viola may be missing, and it's not well balanced sound-wise.
You're exactly right. When I was doing it, I wanted to be accurate, so I looked up on the internet string quartets. I'm like, well, there's no bass in any of these. And in my mind, I thought it should be a bass, a cello, a viola, or violin. I thought, well, and most of them were a cello, 2 violins, and a viola. And I thought, well, it may not be accurate, but I'm going to put the bass in because I like that instrument. See, my 3 sons all play. One plays the violin, one played the viola, and one plays the cello. So I had a natural interest in it. And yeah, you're right. I mean, if this was a whole crowd of string musicians, they'd probably all be saying the same thing. But that's all right. Artistic license, right?
Yeah. I got a question on that same painting. There's a texture going diagonally on the top.
Right
Is
here.
that in the wood? And there's more.
Yeah.
There's more texture on that. So
It's not texture. It's a piece of plywood that had been crushed or something.
yeah.
And when I started to paint, I didn't even notice it until I got well into the paint. I'm like, I should have flipped this over.